Bruxelles,
Paris, Madrid.
Hi there, I'm Hermine. In this episode, we carry on looking at how the European Union can stay competitive in the global economy without giving up key social rights, such as minimum wages and secure employment. And we're wondering, with falling birth rates and an aging population, will we have the workforce we need to stay competitive in Europe? With the EU currently debating immigration, we have to ask ourselves, can we do without non-European workers? Can we be competitive without accepting migrants? It's pretty much a given that the old continent is, well, rather old. Even in a country like France, where the fertility rate used to be higher than in most European countries, there are now more deaths than births. But to try and keep on paying healthcare, elder care, and pensions, the EU needs to keep growing economically. AI can help us with many different tasks and maybe even fix some job shortages. But it won't be enough. And we also don't know yet the full extent of its impact on our economies. Some shortages have become pretty common all over Europe. Maria Georgiana Teodorescu, a Conservative member of the European Parliament from Romania, says employers are looking for highly qualified candidates. But not only.
Around 75% of European companies currently say they have difficulty finding employees with the right skills. The demand is indeed high in areas such as IT, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, software development. But that is not all we need at European level. In addition, we have a significant shortage of employees in traditional essential sectors such as industry, construction, transport, and even the healthcare system. In many cases, it is not just about those with very advanced skills, but in particular those in technical and professional trades.
Alarmingly, statistics show that labour shortages in sectors such as construction, manufacturing and transport have tripled over the last 10 years. Some of these shortages can be attributed to a structural problem in the education system, characterized by underinvestment in vocational training. According to a European report on skills and employment by the European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training, or CEDIFO, there is a vertical mismatch. That is to say, a lot of overqualified young people coexist with these skills shortages. There's a lot more demand for technical and semi-skilled workers than there are to go around. But fewer and fewer young people are choosing to follow the more traditional vocational pathways. Sectors involved in the ecological and industrial transition, as well as logistics, infrastructure, service and care, are especially hard hit. This situation is directly harming the EU economy. So can we meet these needs through the ongoing training of European workers and the retraining of the unemployed? Teodorescu believes this could go some way to closing the gap.
Here we must point out that, according to European statistics, there are still over 13 million young Europeans who are at present neither employed nor in education or training. Furthermore, the labour market participation rate for people aged between 55 and 64 is still below 60% in many member states, suggesting significant untapped potential. There are therefore people who can be retrained for sectors facing staff shortages.
When it comes to work-related learning and development, workers often don't have a clear idea of the required skills. Let's take, for example, artificial intelligence. The World Economic Forum says that working with AI and getting more productivity from it comes from, and I quote, orchestration rather than substitution, end of quote. This means that employers have to take the lead in redefining the skills needed for human-led, AI-supported teamwork. But jobs that need special skills and are more hands-on are less likely to be replaced by AI than others that tend to be more academic. The EU has been trying to deal with this and is now drawing up a new European strategy for vocational education and training, But none of the solutions tried so far to deal with the shrinking workforce seem to have worked, as Aurelia Maldutite says. She's the president of the Lithuanian Employers Confederation.
So far, over the past decade, this problem has not decreased. It is only deepening. It is clear that, to date, no solutions have been found either within our education systems or involving people who are either economically inactive or unemployed. These people are not being retrained to work in certain vital fields.
So why is that? Well, these jobs aren't always seen as appealing. There's a shortage of teachers and the working conditions aren't great. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but it's clear that this is a significant challenge. So this gets us back to our initial question. Does the EU need more migrants right now in order to remain competitive? Nikos Vasileu is a businessman who sits on the board of the Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Here's what he says.
We see that ultimately these gaps are often filled by people coming from other countries, from third countries, who help make up for these shortages. We have a highly educated population with strong qualifications, but what we lack is the middle and lower skilled workforce, and that is where the problem lies.
But right now, in many member states, the focus is more on sending migrants back where they came from than on welcoming more. The EU has recently tightened its migration rules, focusing more on controlling irregular arrivals while maintaining limited legal pathways for workers. In a nutshell, rather than opening the doors, this policy shifts the focus towards closing them. French MEP Fabienne Keller from the Renew Europe group helped negotiate the EU's new migration pact. And she explains.
Our migration is a response to the expectations of business leaders and to economic needs. But the key thing is that it must be organized. This is really the opposite of irregular migration, where migrants try to integrate themselves into the labour market as best they can after several years.
A new EU talent pool that was set up in June connects employers based in the EU with job seekers from outside the bloc for roles where there's a shortage of workers. It also makes sure that national immigration rules are being followed. The idea behind this à la carte immigration is to choose the specific migrants needed to help our economy become more competitive. And the underlying idea is that managed migration is better and more politically acceptable than uncontrolled migration. Some people are even starting to see migration as a way to boost competitiveness. Take Lithuania, for example. It seems that the country's recent growth is linked to an influx of foreign workers. And that's according to Andrius Romanovskis, president of the Lithuanian Business Confederation.
Lithuania's growth over the past 3 to 4 years has been largely determined by the fact that since 2020, and particularly since 2022, when the full-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine began, the number of foreigners, third-country citizens, here has increased to more than 200,000. This marks a major influx into our labour market. Most of these immigrants are Ukrainians and Belarusians, who have truly contributed and continue to contribute to our economic growth.
Because Europe's talent pool recruits for areas suffering from critical skill shortages, these workers are more likely to be welcomed professionally and offer fair working and living conditions, notes MEP Keller.
The very principle of the talent pool is to recruit people in fields where Europe has a shortage of skills, at least in numerical terms. So, by definition, the beneficiaries of this scheme should be fairly well received, at least from a work perspective. Then there is the question of their general reception, access to housing and access to healthcare. Here, it is important that they enjoy the same rights as other workers.
But how can Europe make sure it both attracts and keeps hold of these workers? In fact, according to a study by the Luxembourg Institute of Socio-Economic Research, or LISER, it's not as simple as it seems to keep them in. Here's Joel Machado, a research scientist at LISER. on this.
The rates vary between countries, ranging from 30% to over 70% of people leaving within 5 years. One must be aware, when implementing certain policies, such as labour market policies and housing policies that set out to attract foreign workers, that a significant proportion of these workers may not stay in the country or on the labour market for long.
The benefits to the economy depend on a migrant's successful integration in their new country. But here, this is not always straightforward, as Nikos Vassiliou reminds us.
There are also challenges related to social integration and adapting to European ways of working and living. The European context can be quite different from that of other regions, and this can make integration more difficult in some cases. We see this, for example, in the hospitality sector, where it can sometimes be challenging for newcomers to adapt to the working culture and expectations.
Many experts would say that the quality and availability of housing is one of the biggest barriers to successful integration. But it's also important to cater to migrants' language learning, training, qualification recognition, and social inclusion needs. But before we try to attract new migrants, you might ask why we don't start with the ones who are already here. Vassiliou says that there are plenty of irregular migrants already living in Europe who'd love a chance to regularize their status and put their skills to good use.
We should make use of the existing migrant workforce that is already here. We need to train them and see to what extent they can be integrated into society. For workers to be productive, they need to be part of the social fabric. They are not machines, they are people.
And Gonzalo Van Roel, a policy researcher and activist from the Barcelona Institute for Global Health, also draws attention to some of the challenges faced by irregular migrants at the end of what is often an arduous journey to Europe.
A person in an irregular situation cannot, for example, have their actual qualifications recognized. You may have technical skills at an intermediate or advanced level, but these need to be recognized in order for you to enter the labor market. For a person in an irregular situation, it is difficult to get involved in entrepreneurial activities, for example, because you are off the radar of the institutions. You cannot apply for a loan. In other words, there are many factors linked to a country's competitiveness and productivity that depend on the administrative status of its population.
Judith Kohlenberger, a migration researcher who is campaigning for a more constructive and humane development of European asylum and migration policy, gives a very concrete example of what too many administrative hurdles can lead to by comparing the qualification recognition requirements of two different member states, namely her home country, Austria, and its close neighbour, Germany.
For example, in 2015, we observed that the influx of Syrian refugees included Syrian doctors. Some of them went on to Germany. We're talking a few hundred people, as the recognition of medical qualifications is generally a little easier in Germany. This clearly shows that the top 1 to 2% of people, from a qualification perspective, people who are very much needed in our healthcare system, slipped through our fingers by moving on. I think that is a loss for our nation, quite frankly. It is a loss of human capital.
Then, in mid-April, the Spanish government announced that it would offer legal status to some 500,000 undocumented people, a move that was welcomed by many as both progressive and pragmatic. Successful applicants are set to receive a 1-year renewable residence permit that includes an immediate open work permit. Gonzalo Van Roel says this one's a no-brainer.
If you already have that workforce in the country, that talent is already here, already established. To put it in very utilitarian terms, this is a population that's using public services, but doesn't have the opportunity to contribute with their talent, their taxes, their social security contributions, their share of responsibility. So I think it makes sense to have this kind of regularization, right? Just speaking in terms of self-interest.
Spain's move is pretty bold. especially with all the tightening of migration rules happening across Europe right now. It's turning the country into something of an oddity on the continent. Though, because a lot of the new arrivals and irregular workforce come from Latin America, they have cultural similarities and speak the same language, and they will therefore be better received and integrated, Vasileu believes. So, will a tailored migration be the answer to filling Europe's job vacancies and making it more competitive? It's obvious that not everyone's convinced, notwithstanding the many bureaucratic hurdles to jump over when it comes to welcoming new candidates from outside the bloc. For example, some governments only issue a certain number of visas each year, and it can be hard for foreign qualifications to be recognized. So, what do you think? If you have any comments or thoughts about this episode or any of our podcasts and articles, please share them online. We are on www.euronetplus.eu. Thank you all colleagues for your contributions today. Romina Cornaciu at Radio Romagna, Auguste Liberite from Žinių Radijas in Lithuania, Nikos Andritsas and Mariana Pliakostamu from Greece Sky Radio, Charlotte at Euradio in France, Aitana from Es Radio Castilla y León in Spain, Jean-Claude from Luxembourg's Radio 100.7, Neja from Agora Radio in Austria, Morgan from the Europeans for checking my script, and of course Monica for editing this podcast. And thank you for listening. We'll be back after a short break with more from our Tomorrow's Europe podcast. Stay tuned and take care.